And today we are going to discuss about how Aristotle moved further in discussing about well-made tragic plot. As we have seen yesterday, the parallel of reversal and recognition, and this reversal and recognition which points way to tragic error. This tragic error Aristotle discusses in chapter number 13, and later on in chapter number 14 Aristotle discusses about the role of ignorance. The chapter number 13 and 14 both address the question of best kind of tragic plot. Now we can say both chapters assume that this is the plot that is most effective in arousing pity and fear, but they take different lines of approach and reach seemingly to incompatible conclusions. Now, the approach in chapter number 13 to analyze in detail the tragic change of fortune, Aristotle identifies two variables in this change, which between them determine our emotional response to it. Which are those two variables? One, or the first variable is the direction of change. From good fortune to bad fortune or bad fortune to good fortune, these are the direction of change. And the other is moral status of the person or persons, you can say, who are involved into this particular kind of change. What is the moral status of person, whether he is virtuous or wicked, whatever it may be? There is going to be a moral status of that person. Now, if you try to understand that pity and fear are the responses to bad fortune. If something good is happening, why the audience would feel pity and fear? That means pity and fear, both the responses are to the bad fortune. The change from good fortune to bad fortune is usually rated more highly to evoke the responses of pity and fear rather than the reversal one. Because if bad fortune changes to good fortune, how it will evoke pity and fear? We know it very well. It will not evoke pity and fear. And that's why change of good fortune to bad fortune, this is highly rated. This is highly used in a well formed tragic plot. Now, this is the one side of the story. This is the one side of understanding that how this is going on. But the second side of the story, we need to understand it very carefully. Now, the fall or the reversal or the change in fortune of which person appeals more to the audience. The fall of outstandingly virtuous character. The fall of outstandingly virtuous character into misfortune is morally repellent and disgusts us, while the fall of bad character into misfortune is morally satisfying us most of the time. If virtuous character's fortune is changed from good to bad, we feel very sad, pity for him. But if the character of, if wicked character or wicked person who fall, who changes from good fortune to bad fortune, it may satisfy us. It pleases us that yes, this is what has to happen because he is a bad person. It satisfies. Please understand the two different responses that takes place if the change in character, the moral status of character. The bad character, if his fortune changes from good to bad, it pleases us, it satisfies us, we feel that good that it has happened to this bad character. But if this thing happens to a good character, undisputable, virtuous character, highly rewarded, virtuous character, if something happens to him, that develops pity and fear in the minds of audience. Now, if you understand very carefully, we feel sorry for that particular character. If a good character is his character, his virtuous character's fortune is changed from good to bad, we feel sorry for it. We feel disgust that yes, this should not happen. But will it evoke both the emotions? Now, in other case, there is no chance of evoking the emotions of pity and fear. When the character is wicked, there's no chance of evoking pity and fear. We feel satisfied, we feel pleased. But when something happened to good character, it makes us feel sorry, disgust. And we think that this should not happen. He's a good man. This should not happen to this particular man. But will you call this sort of emotion as pity and fear? Will this sort of reaction can be treated as pity and fear? No. We simply feel bad for that particular character. We feel more repellent and disgust. Now, in both the cases, please understand this. In both these cases, the response of pity is blocked by the contrary emotions. How it is blocked? You feel bad, you feel disgust. You think that, yeah, this should not happen to this particular man. He's a good man. Now, this is not pity. This is not pity. You feel sorry for him. And that's why it is most important for us to understand that when these two situations blocked the emotions of pity and fear, then what are the things that need to be considered as the ideal thing to evoke pity and fear in the minds of audience? What can be an ideal tragic plot which can create pity and fear? Because when we are discussing, when we are pointing out, we should understand it very carefully. We should understand it very categorically that two things are important. One is the change in fortune, which can develop pity and fear from bad to good, good to bad. Second, about the character, he should be either virtuous or wicked, to whom this change in fortune is taking place, with whom this change is taking place. If it is taking place with a good person, wicked, virtuous character, if the virtuous character's fortune is changing from good to bad, it gives us more repellent and disgust reaction. We feel very disgust. Yes, this should not happen. This should not happen to this particular person. That's what we always used to feel. That's what we always used to find it out. But when we are simply understanding that this should not happen to this particular person, in this case, we are forgetting the most essential and important fact that the emotions are the emotions which are evoked, the emotions which are part of our reaction, those are blocking the aim that what the tragic plot requires to achieve, to evoke pity and fear, which will be resulted into purgation, which would be resulted into purification of human soul. Now, what would be the ideal tragic plot then, my friends? We need to understand that. So, the ideal tragic plot, please understand this, I'm telling it very carefully. So, this ideal tragic plot cannot be constructed around exceptionally virtuous person or a wicked person. This cannot be, you cannot say that this ideal tragic plot requires these two things. These two things are required, two variables are required, but you cannot develop an ideal tragic plot with exceptionally virtuous person or wicked person. It must be, therefore, be based on someone between these two. Broadly speaking, virtuous, but not outstandingly so virtuous. Why? Because as I said, if he's a virtuous person, you know that virtuous person, excellently or extremely or exceptionally virtuous person. If some bad fortune takes place, then we said that this is bad, this is sad, but it is not evoking pity and fear because you know it. If you are trying to imitate the action from your society, if you want to make the audience to get convinced, then you have to point out that not all the persons are exceptionally virtuous. We are not exceptionally virtuous. Let we accept it very frankly that we are not exceptionally virtuous. Sometimes we are wicked. So the ideal tragic plot needs a character who is following this particular idea. The ideal tragic plot requires a character who is not exceptionally virtuous nor he is exceptionally wicked. He should be combination of both the things. Why? Because their virtue is not outstanding. We do not find their downfall morally repellent because we sometimes used to say that the downfall is undeserved, so we pity them. Why we feel pity for them? If the change in fortune is undeserved, it is not okay. He committed a mistake, but this should not happen with this man. It is so sorry for him. We used to think in that way. Oedipus, okay, Oedipus has committed a mistake, but this should not be with him. We feel pity for Oedipus that okay, this is not his mistake. He doesn't know that he's killing a stranger. And the stranger is his own father. He doesn't know that. But he undeserved this kind of punishment that evokes pity in us. We think that Shakespeare should not make Hamlet die because why? What Hamlet did? What is his mistake? Hamlet is taking revenge of his own father who appeared as a ghost and informed him that he should take revenge, and that's why he's trying to take revenge. He's a good boy, but he undeserved this death. This evokes pity. Pity is simply coming out of the downfall that takes place because of the change in fortune. And that makes the audience to feel that they are looking at the character who is one of them, who is with them. And this type of undeserved things takes place in our life also. And so we start to find our own reflection into that particular character. And that's why the character, the ideal in an ideal tragic plot, the character should not be exceptionally virtuous or exceptionally wicked. He the character must be in between the two. He is not exceptionally good, he is not exceptionally wicked, he is a mixture of the two. Sometimes he is wicked, sometimes he is exceptionally good. Because virtue is not outstanding of is not outstanding. So we do not find their downfall morally repellent because their downfall is undeserved. They don't deserve this kind of downfall in their life. And that evokes pity in the minds of audience. If a tragic character does not fall into misfortune, please understand this situation also. If a tragic character does not fall into misfortune because he or she deserves what is the we have to search what is the reason for their change in fortune, why their fortune is changed, what is the reason for this. Fortune is not changing because it has no reason. Every change is having some kind of reasons. Without reason, change is not taking place. So why this character deserves these kinds of things? Why this character fall into misfortune? Why this character deserves this kind of, we can say, punishment? There need to be certain reason. Otherwise, this is not going to happen simply because you need to create a tragic plot, you need to create a tragedy. That's why we all of a sudden decided that okay, this is the thing that we should show, that there is a change in fortune, because we feel that we need to make this character tragic, and that's why we are showing it. No, there need to be a solid reason for changing all those things. Why you are changing it? If you are simply changing because you want to change it, you don't find any sort of reasons for it, then the audience will not accept it. It will be not digested by the audience that yes, without any reason, this character has committed this mistake, so they will not find pity for them. Evoking the emotions of pity and fear requires a solid reason. Now, when you are looking at an accident, for example, in your day to day life, the accident will not evoke emotions of pity and fear in your mind. But when you come to know that this person who died in this accident has nothing to do with this, has nothing to do with this kind of death, because he was walking on the road and the truck changed its direction and crushed him. So you feel bad for him. Now the emotions of pity and fear even does not evoke. But when you come to know the reason that there is a quarrel inside the truck's cabin between the driver and his assistant, and in that quarrel they lost the control over the truck, and that's why the truck has crushed this man who is walking on the footpath. In that case, it develops a sort of pity for you for that dead man. Okay, this is not his mistake. Now, there is a reason. There is a reason, and that's why we require a reason to evoke pity in the minds of audience. And Aristotle is answering to this question, that what would be the reason for the change in fortune of the character. Now please understand, I have already told you the condition of the character, what how this character should be. He should not be exceptionally virtuous, or he should not be wicked. He should be the mixture or in between the two. He is not exceptionally virtuous, he is virtuous. He is not too wicked, he is little bit cunning even sometimes, because we are also cunning at certain times. So he's in between these two, in between these two feelings, because we are also living in the same kind of situation. We are also following the same kind of characteristic, that we are not exceptionally virtuous, we are not exceptionally wicked, we are in between. And if the change in fortune takes place, then we ask a question, that what are the reasons to the change, to have a change in fortune? And for this, Aristotle answers. And Aristotle's answer in this case is introducing a new and most famous and the most often misunderstood. Aristotle answers to this question with the most famous and most of the time or often misunderstood concept of poetics, that is called as error. The Greek word for this word error is hamartia, Hamartia, hamartia. Now, this Greek word hamartia covers, as we have seen with the other translations of Greek words also, they covers a large area, but we have restricted it for the sake of our understanding. Hamartia covers or translates, or which can have the meaning widened up to making a mistake or getting something wrong in the more general sense, you can say. Making a mistake, committing a mistake, or getting something wrong. So the word itself gives little help in interpreting Aristotle's precise meaning of error. And we must be guided by this context. This at once excludes the interpretation of hamartia as moral flaw, because this is what usually most of the time is being used, that it is a moral flaw in the character that makes him to change in his fortune, that always change in fortune because of the moral flaw. Or most of the time critics used to call it as a tragic flaw. Hamartia is a tragic flaw. Please understand, there is a difference between flaw and mistake. Flaw is part of your instinct. Mistake, it happens sometimes, not regularly. But if the mistake is happening regularly, it becomes a flaw in your personality. It becomes flaw in your regular understanding. There's a difference between flaw and mistake. Please understand this. Usually, most of the editors, most of the translators used to translate hamartia as a tragic flaw or moral flaw. What has to be considered, what has to be understood, that hamartia is making a mistake or getting something wrong. This is so simple. That's why it excludes the other translation. It excludes the other meaning of hamartia, which most of the time, most of the editors and most of the analysts of poetics use. Making a mistake, getting something wrong. That is called as hamartia. Now, the second time Aristotle uses this word, and he uses the word when he speaks of a serious hamartia. Serious hamartia. But a serious moral flaw would be precisely the wickedness that Aristotle ruled out. Serious moral flaw is always associated with the wicked person. Aristotle ruled out. There's a serious mistake. mistakes you usually don't commit. It happens sometimes, and for that, if you deserve a very severe punishment, then that evoke pity and fear. That okay, this is what the character committed this, but this doesn't deserve this severe punishment. Now, to avoid this inconsistency of the meaning of the understanding of hamartia, some interpreters have uh, concluded that hamartia has no moral content at all. Hamartia need not to carry a moral content in it. It's a simple something which is wrong, something getting wrong, something getting something wrong or making a mistake. It doesn't carry a moral content in it, according to some interpreters. Now, on this view, Aristotle is referring exclusively. Please understand what Aristotle is answering to the question that how it will evoke pity and fear in the minds of audience. He introduces a term called hamartia, means error, and this error is nothing but making a mistake or getting something wrong. It has nothing to do with your moral behavior. It has nothing to do with your morality. It has nothing to do with your chastity. It has nothing to do with your exceptionally virtuous personality. It has nothing to do with that. Even most of the interpreters used to say that hamartia has nothing to do with moral things. Moral is not part of hamartia. So, how this different meanings, how this inconsistency in the interpretations need to be verified? For that, you will find out Aristotle's reference for this is most important. What Aristotle is referring exclusively Aristotle is referring for an intellectual error. The mistake should be intellectual one. The error should be intellectual errors. Intellectual errors, ignorance, and mistakes of facts. Intellectual error because of the ignorance and because of the mistakes of the facts. It is not that the change in fortune took place because God planned this. Aristotle, as I said you very in the very early lectures when we talk about technique, at that time I have pointed out that Aristotle is ruling out the use of God in tragedy. And that's why what error a human can commit, it's an intellectual error because he is ignorant about the things. Oedipus is ignorant about the stranger and mistakes of fact. That the fact is presented in such a way in front of in front of the hero that he feels that this is what is correct. Othello, without verifying that whether the handkerchief is given by Iago to Desdemona or Desdemona's loss of handkerchief has a role of Iago into it, without confirming this, he started to think that this is what Desdemona had done deliberately. Mistakes of fact. So it's an intellectual error, ignorance and mistakes of fact. Now this dovetails well with his account of reversal and recognition. This ignorance and mistakes of fact, in making reversal and recognition active, because the reversal and recognition makes the character to understand that he has committed such type of an error, such type of a mistake. And this arises out of misinterpretation of the circumstances in which the person is acting. Because during recognition, during reversal, both the terms that we discussed yesterday, the character used to, or we come to know that this kind of situation arise out of misinterpretations of circumstances. So error in this sense is central to the complex plots which Aristotle favors more. For Aristotle, complex plots are the most suitable plots for tragedy. And for every complex plot, there need to be an error, and this error is very much central to the change in fortune. But another interesting twist in this understanding. But the interpretation of Hamertia is somehow we can say that it is too restricted. First, the assumption that the moral and intellectual error can sharply distinguished, which is not going to be corrected. This is what we have to understand. In mathematics, for example, I might get an arithmetical calculation wrong. Usually, this happens with all of us, usually in our school days, in the period of mathematics, in the period of algebra. Usually, our arithmetical calculation gets wrong because most of the time I'm not paying attention to this arithmetical calculation. This is what my condition when I was a kid. But now if I commit any mistake in my arithmetical calculation, okay, I can rectify it with my teacher, and teacher will correct it. Oh, this is the mistake you have committed. Now you have to pay attention to it. Because I have not paid attention, I committed the mistake. But if I am an engineer who used to design a bridge, now negligence in this case, not paying attention in this case, will cause severe issues and problems. That negligence of an engineer clearly has a moral as well as an intellectual dimension to it. If a bridge collapses and there's a great loss of life because of the negligence of engineers, miscalculation. Negligence as a student in arithmetic class, miscalculation in arithmetic class will not have any sort of effect. except getting corrected by the teacher, or you will be punished by the teacher for that same small mistake that you have not paid attention. But if an engineer committed a mistake, it has got both moral as well as intellectual dimension to it. Now, if you see that the moral aspect of this error of an engineer is serious, what an engineer did, it is serious. But this does not mean that the engineer is wicked, because you will see that okay, this is a mistake committed by this engineer. He is negligent. Okay, absolutely negligent. This is moral negligence, moral error, not flaw. Please understand. This is moral error. That's why great lives, great loss of lives. That doesn't mean he is a wicked person. He's always killing people in this way. No, he's not a wicked person. We can imagine circumstances under which the negligence, or you can say the blameworthy, is understandable. Now, suppose this same engineer had just been told that he's facing a severe terminal cancer. And because of this terminal cancer, he ought to have taken more care for his health. In these circumstances, we can understand his failure, that yes, because of that side effects of the drugs that he is taking, may be possible that negligence has taken place. We can, it is going to be mild down about his error. Now, secondly, it is possible to construct a situation in which someone who knows what he or she is doing, and so is not subject to any intellectual error, does something they ought not to do. But understandably, they did it. The first one is moral error. Now we are looking at an intellectual error. That we know that this person has not to do this particular thing, but he did. But he did that particular thing. And when we come to know that he did that particular thing, and in this particular thing, once we come to know that he did this particular thing, we immediately can say that he has to stop. He did not do this, but understandably, he did it. Perhaps they give way to intolerance, or you can say intolerance, pressure, or provocation. There's intolerable pressure on him, or someone provoked him to do this. the circumstances under which they act. Because if you look, Shakespeare's Macbeth, Macbeth is not at all a wicked person, but he is provoked to kill his own king. And this mistake, this error he committed. As an audience, we know that he should not do this. As an audience, we are aware. We always feel that, yes, Oedipus, what are you doing? You are killing your own father. This stranger is your father. Why you are killing this? Circumstances has made, because he's walking on the road, the king is coming from behind and he challenged him that you have to give way to the king, and he said, I am walking first on the road, and they started fight with each other, and then they started to have a war with, they have fight with each other, and in that fight he killed his father. That the circumstances provoked him. So we need to understand the circumstances also. There may be a moral error, there may be an intellectual error. The circumstances under which they act always mitigate the moral error in some way. This will lead to moral error by in some way. This is taking you towards that particular thing. The error may be a serious one, which is leading to or which is resulting into a disastrous consequences. But the mitigating circumstances mean that it does not express a serious flaw in their moral character. There's no serious flaw in the moral of that particular character. The moral of that character, the moral of that particular person who is acting in that situation is quite good. But circumstances provoked him to commit this. Circumstances provoked him to do this. And that's why he commits such type of error. And that's why error is serious one. Aristotle attempts to prescribe the best kind of tragic plot with the help of this sort of error. Hamartia includes errors made in ignorance or through misjudgment. Hamartia includes these kinds of errors which is made in ignorance or errors through misjudgment. Errors occurred because of misjudgment. This will also include moral errors, because if the engineer is saying that he is having cancer and in that he committed this negligence, there is a moral error that he has to explain it early that I am a cancer patient. I may not have a concentration on that particular thing. That is his moral. It's a moral error. Intellectual error, that circumstances provoked him to commit that type of a mistake. Or he has misjudgmented. He doesn't carry the proper judgment for this. There's a misjudgment. That's why Hamartia includes both the kinds of error, moral error, intellectual error. Moral error which do not imply wickedness of that character, because he's wicked, that's why he's hiding that he's having a cancer. No, he's not wicked. And therefore, we have to understand that how Aristotle is attempting, we may say that Aristotle's procedure is negative in prescribing the well or best kind of tragic plot, because a narrow prescriptive of such kind of hamartia leads us to think that Aristotle's procedure is negative because he excludes various kinds of plots which he thinks demonstrably less than ideal. These are not ideal. He excludes most kinds of plot. If the plot carries hamartia, then he says it's a best plot. He excludes most of the plots which are not accordingly him ideal. But that leaves a considerable scope for diversity in this in plot. The change to bad fortune must come because of hamartia. Even we can say that is not deserved, since hamartia can take variety of forms, error can take variety of forms. So we cannot say that if this carries this, then this is going to be called as a ideal plot. Our disagreement with the idea of ideal plot is because it is restricted. It has restricted our understanding, because if there is hamartia, then that is to be called as an ideal plot. He has not pointed out various different things. The engineer has declared that he is a cancer patient, but still the system forced him to work. Then how will you call him as a moral if that moral error? He has not hidden anything. Nothing is hidden by him. Will you call this as a moral? Because others have forced him to do that particular work. Circumstances provoked him. So that you cannot say it's an intellectual error, because circumstances provoked him. He knows that it is going to be a mistake if he did now. So certain things have not been clarified. That's why the narrow prescription to consider an ideal tragic plot, best kind of tragic plot. That's why we can say that Aristotle, where is talking about hamartia, where hamartia can take various varieties of forms, he's not considered it. He only restricted it to these two kind of errors. Still, he is talking that. Still, he is pointing out that that is to be considered as an best kind of tragic plot. How this discussion goes on, how he talks about all those things when he discussed all these things in chapter number 13, and as we have seen that in chapter number 14, he later on tries to bring out different concept, role of ignorance in chapter number 14. We'll discuss the role of ignorance of Aristotle in chapter number 14 on 15th Friday. Okay, so tomorrow we don't have lecture. On Friday we are going to meet once again at 10:30, and tomorrow's lecture will continue it on Sunday. Okay, thank you friends.